So first thing first, I want to make sure we're on the same page about what I mean by function scoping. It's okay if that's confusing to you. Honestly, I don't remember all the rules all the time, and sometimes I have to look things up. So why don't we make this your reference to be able to refer back to if you get confused about function scoping. So come into the gist here, and don't confuse this with block scoping. I've categorized this here because this is pertinent to our discussion of block scoping, but click on what happens when you pick a font size. So I've got an example I'd like you to work through. I'd like you to take this example and read through it, first just reading the code, and then after you read the code and you think you have a good idea of what this does, specifically what happens when we click on the buttons that are generated. So we have a click event listener here, and we have some buttons that are generated. Once you think you have an idea of what's going on in the code, then go ahead and click on the buttons and see if the console output has what you expected. So go ahead and pause the video now. All right, so let's see what happens here. And let's do that by clicking on one of the buttons. So I'm going to click on number 1 here, -100%. So when I read through the code, the first thing that jumps out to me is that this should change the font size to 100%. But that looks really big. And if I look down in the console output, even though I picked 1, I'm getting a message that says that I picked number 4 and that the size is 400%. So that's interesting. How about we try one of the other buttons? So 2, does the exact same thing. So does 3 and 4. So no matter what I push, it seems like the code is selecting number 4 at 400%. And if you're like me and most people, when you read through the code, you're probably led to believe that when you click on 1, the font would go to 100%. When you click on 2, it'd go to 200%, etc. But that's not what it's doing. And it's not doing that because this code has a bug in it. Well, I guess the code has a bug in it if we intend the font size to be adjusted to whatever percentage we have. Do you know the cause of this problem? This problem is caused because we have a closure here with our event listener, and these variables that we're referring to, button text and size, which are both declared here and initialized here, have changed to the value 4 by the time we fire off the event listener. Though it seems like just reading through this code, I'm led to believe that the size and button text variables are unique to each iteration of the loop. But that's not really what's going on here. This is what's really going on here because of how function scoping works. Because of function scoping, the declaration of variables are pulled to the top of the current function scope. And in this case, we have no function, so they're just pulled to the top of this code file, more or less. So really, this is what we have. Var size and var button text. The declarations are pulled to the top. So you could get rid of the declaration here. Even though we declared it down here, the declarations are hoisted. And thus, we're changing these variables that are global to our for loop so that by the time we click on any one of these buttons, the size and button text are fixed at 4 and 400% respectively. And this can catch you off guard because in many languages that have block scope, this would not be the case. We have a block here with our for loop that's nested, so that would lead me to believe that this is a separate scope, but it's not in JavaScript. So this is one of the problems we can run into with function scope in traditional JavaScript applications. However, with ES6, we have some help here to work around this, to work in a style we're perhaps more used to work in a block scoping style. And let me undo my changes here, put this back to the start. The neat thing is, all I have to do is switch from var to let. And now where I declare my variables at, inside of this for loop body, so inside of this block, these variables now are local to each iteration of the for loop. So I won't share one variable across all my iterations of this for loop. And thus, when I run this again, and let me clear the output just to make sure we're not confused. If I click on 1, I'm at 100%, 2 for 200%, 3 for 300%, and you can even see the font size bumping up there. So our code is now doing what we expect by simply switching over to the let keyword when we declare and initialize our variables. So this is one example of block scoping. Let's move on and take a look at some more.